Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 word and to some reaction to the Mexico City Grand Prix, the thriller in vanilla. Look, I've seen people in chat saying it's the worst they've ever seen. I've seen far worse than that if you want to talk boring, but that was, should we say, all about strategy, really, wasn't it? Not the thriller I was hoping for this weekend after what was actually quite an exciting race in COTA. But, you know, there's a few bits to talk about. My notes are a little bit sparse, if I'm being generous, but we will try and get through everybody as always. But I suspect that's not going to take all that long. But, yeah, I've put a poll in the chat as always. Asking you guys to rate the race at the moment. For those just tuning in, it's pretty much between average or bad. To be honest, 49% average is winning that poll at the moment. So get your votes in and we'll close that towards the end of the stream. All the usual stuff. But really, I don't really know where to start on this one. I'm going to pull in Stuart first of all, of course. We are just going to hop straight on with it because I think we can fly through this pretty quickly, Stuart, if I'm being honest. Good evening, Stuart, the late night crew, whoop and all that. Did you enjoy that absolute thriller?
Yeah, it never really came together, did it? I have to say, I'm one of those people. I know, you see how people react to the races unfolding on Twitter, and there's a lot of people who, like, if it's not immediately grabbing you and being exciting, they start writing it off as being boring. And I'm one of those people who's like, no, just wait, because we're going to see how the strategy's going to unfold. And then after the first round of pit stops, then we kind of know where we are. But actually, we waited and we waited and we waited, and it just never really came together, did it? And I think if Mercedes' optimism and hope about how strategy would unfold came true, then I think we might have had a really good, interesting race. But actually, they were well wide of the mark, weren't they? And actually, if they'd listened to Pirelli, yeah, those hard tires were never the tire to be on, were they? But yeah, it's a shame, really. It's a shame because it could have been a bit different. The first few corners were quite fun, weren't they? And we had a little bit of fun in the midfield, but actually, most of the time we were kind of just waiting, weren't we? It was a bit of a waiting for Godot kind of race.
Yeah, I think Crofty said in commentary a couple of times, didn't he? Stick around, it's going to get exciting. And then it got to about lap 61 and I was like, oh, come on, Crofty. It's not happening, mate. It's one of those races where it's been done for a while. Strategy, I found the strategy interesting. That's why I won't say it was totally boring, because I did find it interesting because there was that question mark, and that's where we'll start, really. I think we'll do Red Bull and Mercedes together because they kind of come as a package in this race, don't they? But I kind of that little wondering, is Verstappen going to be able to get to the end on those medium tyres, even though the answer seemed like yes? There's always that little doubt, isn't there? You never know, especially with these 2022 tyres, what they're going to do. And then the Mercedes went on the hards, which I found quite curious. And I thought, well, as you've said, Stuart, from what Pirelli was saying, these are going to be disastrous. But initially, the pace seemed to be there, didn't it? The hards seemed to be warming up quite nicely. They were working really, really well. And then it just slowly sort of fell away and Verstappen's lead began to grow and the mediums were holding on really nicely. Sergio Perez, everyone assumed was on a two-stopper, but somehow managed to get those mediums to the end with not great pace, although his final lap wasn't terrible. It was quicker than his teammate, but, you know, not great pace. He was losing time, but it was all about the tyres, who was going to do what was going to fall away. And in the end, nothing. Max Verstappen 15.1 seconds up the road. And really, I guess, aside from strategy, the big talking point today, or two big talking points, really. First of all, Max Verstappen, 14 race wins in a season. I know we have more races now, that's the line, but it's not like 30 races more, is it, than it used to be when Sebastian Vettel was pumping in 13 wins a season. So it's still quite an achievement and something he should be very, very proud of. I don't know about you, Stuart, but Max doesn't strike me as someone who's really that fussed about the records, but Michael Schumacher getting emotional for matching Senna's race wins and things like that, that mattered to him. I'm not sure Max feels that, but do you think he's got to be excited, hasn't he, to beat that and have could have 16 wins this season, for goodness sake. It's absolute madness.
It is, yeah. And I wonder if it's just all sort of happened sort of quite quickly, and so he hasn't really had time to process it yet, or if he kind of, if the writing was on the wall for this many races, quite far in advance. So by the time it came, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. Verstappen's a funny one, isn't he? Because he's actually had a longer period of time before this the last 2 years of being in a championship hunt. He's actually, and he's quite young. He's been around for longer than it seems. So while it feels like he's sort of like hitting all these, starting to pump in these records suddenly and do really well early in his career, and actually he's sort of, quite firmly into the middle part of his, well, it depends how long he races really, career. I don't know. There's something about it. It's like it all seems like it's all happening so quickly, so suddenly, but actually he's spent a long time working up to this period of success. But 14 races, even longer seasons, is quite phenomenal. And actually, I was surprised when they brought up the graphic at the bottom that Hamilton isn't among those with the 13 wins. I was sure he had been. I thought he must have done, just because he's had these 8 years of being in a dominant car. There must have been a season where he got those 13 wins, but no, his highest is 11. I was surprised by that. And I'm not going to be surprised at all if Max does get it up to 16 by the end. Though, as I'm sure we'll get onto, going to be interesting to see if Mercedes can challenge and actually pull off a win in one of these last 2 races.
Yeah, well, that was my next talking point. Is Mercedes? Lewis Hamilton saying after the race, by the way, that he thinks they should have started on the soft and then gone to the mediums and sort of done what Red Bull did, but they did something different, and I feel like that's the right thing to do. If you've not got the outright pace in the car, really, I think the right thing to do is to do something different to Red Bull, because it's the only way you're going to beat them. Reverse that. I feel like you could flip those teams around, and we've had this conversation so many times during Mercedes domination. The only way to beat them is to try something different. They had nothing to lose and everything to gain, so it was the right call for Mercedes to try something different. But that aside, I think they can come out of this weekend very optimistic and last weekend as well, very optimistic for next season. Now, you'll probably look at the times and say, come on, Sean, 15.1 seconds behind today. Without that 11-second stop on last Sunday, Max Verstappen probably cruises there as well. But the point is, they appear to have jumped Ferrari at the moment in terms of pace, certainly based on the last couple of races. And I feel as though there's a lot of positivity there. And I think, didn't Hamilton say after the race on the radio something like, we're getting closer, let's keep pushing. So I think if they don't win a race between now and the end of the season, and by the way, I think whilst Brazil is going to be a big one for power, I think they've got a shot there anyway, because there's, Hamilton's got some very good form in Brazil. But if they don't win a race this season, they've got to be pretty optimistic about 2023 now, not to mention the fact that next year, we're not getting into it too much, but next year, they're going to have significantly more wind tunnel time and CFD time than Red Bull. And they're going to have more than Ferrari as well. So that development race, that could really bring them into play next season quite nicely. I know it's not really race related, but if you saw the race, you'll totally understand why we're maybe wandering off topic a little bit. But do you get what I mean? I think there's a lot of optimism there, or reasons to be optimistic for Mercedes going into next year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was, and we'll get on to Ferrari as well, I think. But I think essentially, yeah, Mercedes have definitely jumped Ferrari. And I don't think it's just, that these 2 races sort of favored them. I think there's there's been a shift happening maybe in the second half of the season, to be honest. That Mercedes development has been really, really good, and Ferrari have not really kept pace, I guess, on the development with the teams around them necessarily. We've seen how they've fallen away from Red Bull, and that's part of the reason that Verstappen has managed to get those 14 wins. Whereas Mercedes seem to have worked out what's, a lot of their struggles, what was causing the problems at the beginning of the race, kind of got on top of that, made some developments. And if they can keep this momentum going and take everything they've learned into next year, we know they know how to develop a good car, and they know how to, do R&D and turn problems around and things. So they could very much start off very strong next year. Whereas Ferrari, in sort of recent history, last decade or so, not been as strong at kind of getting on top of their problems and building on them. They've been very sort of up and down. They've sort of been strong and then been weak. And so it's not really clear where they're going to be next year. So if I was Mercedes, I'd be like, yeah, I would be very much be aiming to be like back in the championship hunt again next year. And just on the strategy for this race, I kind of agree with you. And I agree that it was a good idea to go bold, try something different, try and outfox Red Bull in a different way than just out on pace. But on the other hand, I think because they look so strong, like genuinely strong on pace, they could have potentially taken pole position yesterday, had things fallen the right way, had maybe Hamilton not had one of his laps erased, had they just nailed everything, they were on for pole. They were definitely challengers. And I think maybe they should have perhaps split the strategy. So, tried to go two ways, given Red Bull two ways to look, and maybe just tried to beat them on pace. I think pace-wise, maybe they could have made that happen, because Hamilton was right on Verstappen's tail through the whole first stint on a different tyre, and did have some fairly good pace after the first stops, even though the first stops kind of cost him. The undercut was really powerful from Verstappen. I don't know. I think at least one of those Mercedes could have kept Verstappen on his toes through the majority of the race if they'd have been on the same strategy. I don't know. It's all good looking in hindsight, but I think maybe they should have had a bit more confidence in taking them on pace.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think maybe I was a little surprised they didn't split the strategy. Not necessarily at the start, but in the race, because George Russell I forgot his last name. Great start. George Russell, he was pretty vocal. I mean, they both were quite vocal on the radio, weren't they, about how poor the hard tyre was, and he seemed to want to get onto a different tyre pretty quickly. And I think Crofty made the point in commentary, and I see what he's saying, actually, that maybe when that virtual safety car out, could they have sent brought Russell into the pits, put him out on soft, so he could have tried to close down Perez? Because, I mean, on the last lap, he was, what was it? So a 22.7 for Perez and a 20.1, so 2.6 seconds quicker on that final lap. The only problem was, if he pits, Perez has got plenty of time, hasn't he, to come in and react to that, so maybe it wouldn't have made any difference. But they could have tried to put the pressure on there, is maybe the criticism, I guess, if you want to call it that. It's not really criticism, but that's kind of where I am with that one. A couple of these to point out. Some shift issues early on for Max Verstappen. Yes, it really was one of those races. Lewis Hamilton also complaining of his engine cutting out constantly or frequently or whatever, consistently, I don't know. It's a little bit concern there, I suppose, for Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton fans, but didn't really hamper him massively. I still think second place is a great result, so I think very, very good drive from Max Verstappen, very good drive from Lewis Hamilton. I actually think an all right drive from Sergio Perez as well. Now, I'm a little bit disappointed, Stuart, because I fully expected him to come into this weekend and win his home Grand Prix and make us all happy, and it was going to be wonderful. I know that's not how F1 works. Definitely heart-ruling head there, but he was kind of consistently a second and a half, 2 seconds, wasn't he, off Lewis Hamilton. Ended up nearly 3 seconds behind, but never, I think he got within DRS a couple of times, but never quite had enough, did he, just to take that fight to him, because it could have been even more comfortable for Red Bull if Checo had got ahead, because it would have been tough for the Mercedes to get back past, because that car, even with the thinner air, is ludicrously fast in a straight line. That what is essentially, Stuart, a Honda power unit. Who thought we'd ever be saying that, eh?
How much things change. Yeah, it's fascinating track, this, really. I mean, the thin air makes the DRS a little bit weaker, despite the very high Monaco-esque wings and downforce setups, and as I think Magnussen described on Saturday, the sort of slow corners leading into big straights. The cars aren't very good in these slow corners, so it's kind of hard to get traction out of them. So essentially, the overtaking here is as Magnussen just said, worse this year than last year, in a kind of irony. So yeah, I mean, good race for Perez. It just couldn't. I mean, as we saw all through the field, just wasn't able to, despite seeming a little bit faster, challenge that much, which shame for him. But again, speaks to the sort of pace that Mercedes have sort of found themselves having this season.
Yeah, worth noting as well, slow left rear on Checo's pit stop as well, so he was 5 seconds stationary. So, I mean, we'll never know. Could have brought him into play a little bit closer, but yeah, I've not got much to add on all of this, because basically Verstappen, perfect start, did the right thing, kept them behind. The Mercedes were pretty damn close to the first couple of corners, which was all very exciting, and I'm sure Toto was watching completely comfortably and with no stress whatsoever. But that's kind of it, apart from the strategy we've discussed. So we will move on in a second. We'll get a couple of comments from you guys in chat. First of all, thank you very much, as always, of course, to Charles Edward Cheese, the Cheese Man, as chat like to call him. Thank you so much, mate. Your support is phenomenal, and it means so much, as always. And just a nice comment there. Says, Mercedes, we've got this, boys. Max, you've spilled the macchiato. So there you go. Thank you so much, Charles. Always appreciated. I'm going to be honest, mate. I don't think we're going to get 500 likes tonight because we've only got, we've got 579 people here watching. If everybody watching smashed a like now, we'd absolutely do it, but I'm not sure they will. But if you could leave a like, everybody, that'd be amazing. Let's see how close we can get to 500 for Charles Edward Cheese for that $500 contribution. Thank you so much, mate. That's really appreciated. And thank you to DRD Nobody as well. Says your opinions on the Verstappen Sky boycott and Sky's comments on Perez. As a Brit myself, it's getting obvious by the day. Why can't they let 2021 go? Thank you very much, mate. I will try and remember to do that. And we'll come to that when we do some Q&A a little bit later, because I might have something to say on the situation. It all seems a bit silly, doesn't it? But we'll get into that a little bit later. So thank you so much for your super chat. Let's talk. Well, I'll tell you what, this is probably going to be the shortest thing I've ever done. Ferrari. I've got WTF Ferrari. Where were they this weekend, Stuart? Nothing in qualifying, nothing in the race. Sykes was a minute off the lead. Leclerc 68 seconds off the lead, so just over a minute. And Russell pitted and was still 8.6 seconds up the road from Sainz. I mean, they were league of their own because there was nobody anywhere near them, but they were nowhere near anybody else either. What a shocker. I think the only thing I could say is that somebody said in commentary that maybe the power unit was turned down because of reliability concerns, but it's a bit worrying. Stick a new power unit in, lads. Come on. Give us a race. Because I feel like if Ferrari are in that mix as well, we've got a completely different Grand Prix today. I think they just add something to it and give us a bit more excitement. Yeah,
so it's good having a mix of three teams sort of in the same kind of league fighting each other. But yeah, they just weren't there, and they were struggling. You could hear the turbo whining and struggling from the Ferrari particularly. It was all the onboards on the Ferrari were very whiny, and not my area of expertise to be able to sort of listen to a car engine power unit and fully understand it, but it did sound like it was struggling more than the other cars out there. So they just weren't among the top two. They weren't among the top two teams this weekend. There's not much more you can say about it. But yeah, a bit of a shocker, and they've got to hope it's a one-off and not just part of a pattern of decline that I'm concerned about them having recently, or perhaps their focus has shifted. They're, fairly solidly in second place in the constructors, not super solidly in second place in the constructors. There's a sprint and 2 races to go. Mercedes, I think, are within 40 points of them, so they can't completely take their foot off the gas in terms of keeping their eye on this season. But as with many of the teams, they will have shifted their focus to next year, and perhaps that's where it needs to be. But yeah, again, it's a weird little race from them, and probably one they're just gonna happily turn their back on.
Yeah, and my notes literally just say WTF Ferrari, so there's nothing else to add. But a couple of people in chat just mentioning that the turbo on Sainz's car in particular sounded really whiny today. One person, where are you? I've lost you now. Unknown Race said it sounded a bit like a kettle in quali while braking and lifting. I just saw a comment that I wanted to read. Sorry, it's my chat jumped up there. Felix wants to know where Binotto is hiding. I think they're working on next year, but I hope they're working on next year. It is a 40-point gap, I think, in the constructors. So, that's not impossible for Mercedes. That's not impossible at all. So, Ferrari definitely need to hope that was a one-off. DRD says Ferrari must have turned the car down. Somebody, I can't find the comment now, somebody did actually say that it was Martin Brundle who said, Alphabet Cat, there you go. Martin Brundle said that the engine must have been turned down. Really, really weird. Any comments on the top 3? Just while I give Stuart a chance to add anything if he wants to on the top 3 teams. I don't think there's an awful lot that we can go through other than the cars look nice, don't they, out on track? Very pretty, these cars.
something I will say that I sort of noticed again during the race, which is I'm fascinated if this is a thing that happens when you move into a sort of more dominant winning position, because Verstappen this season, particularly second half of the season, he's got a lot more into that paranoid mindset, complaining about the car, thinking everything's going wrong and stuff. Whereas Hamilton this year, now he's sort of in this underdog state. He's much more comfortable. He's much more, yeah, let's go for it. Keep going, keep pushing. Everything's, let's just crack on. Whereas, reverso changeo, years gone by, Hamilton in a dominant position, always paranoid, always thinks something's going wrong, tires going off, something's funny with the engine. And I think it's just, and it's interesting. And I wonder if that's the mindset that sort of comes with being out front and having to manage the pace of the race, and not maybe necessarily not having a sense of what your benchmark is. Whereas if you're the chasing person, you kind of just see cars ahead of you and you can just aim yourself at them. And I don't know, psychologically, I think it's an interesting thing to see.
Yeah, I have nothing to add on that. I'm just a
little observation.
Yeah, I've somebody's just got me in chat as well with an excellent point. Thank you very much to Andrew for your super chat. Thank you for your support, mate. It says, don't know if you've mentioned it, but we're on for a great title fight. Max Verstappen is only 31 points behind Mercedes. Wow. He really is. Do you know, I always go back to this comment you made a long time ago now, Stuart, on one of these streams, and you said, whilst Verstappen was dominating, I think it was around the summer break time, it didn't feel like it was a one-team dominating season, because it felt closer than it actually was. I'd imagine you probably want to retract that statement now based on the second half of the year, because it definitely feels like one-team domination, doesn't it? And to be 31 points behind Mercedes, that is absolutely unreal. And thank you very much as well to Stein for your super chats. There's €1 for every race Verstappen will have won by the end of the season. Absolute banger and surprise win in Brazil. Thank you so much, mate, for your super chat and your support. And thank you again to Andrew as well, and everybody else that's popped their super chats in. Always appreciated. We will do Q&A later, so I can come to you guys and chat a little bit more. Let's talk about McLaren. Yes, I got it all wrong there. McLaren. Kind of a nothing race initially, it seemed. And they were kind of tail end of the points and involved in some squabbling a little bit with those around them, like the Alpines and the Alfa Romeos. But Daniel Ruddy Ricciardo, it's taken him, what race are we on? 20. It's taken 20 races, but I think he's arrived at last. And I just want to say a massive thank you to Danny Rick, because he kept that interesting right to the end. He's the one I've got all the notes for. So try to move on the inside of Tsunoda in turn 6 and 7, hit him. Tsunoda kind of went up in the air a little bit, came back down with a bump. That was investigated. He was given a 10-second time penalty, I think rightly so. I can't see how that's Tsunoda's fault, and I can't see how he can get away with that. Maybe some frustration because he couldn't get through, I don't know, but definitely a penalty for me. Then apparently was told, or Lando Norris was told, to let Ricciardo through so they could try and build the gap. And not only did he build the gap, but he absolutely vanished. He was so fast towards the end of that race, ending up P7 after his penalty, 2.1 seconds clear of Esteban Ocon. So thank you, Daniel Ricciardo, for keeping that interesting, because that was... I know he's on the fresher tyres. I know he's on the fresher soft tyres, but that felt a bit more like what we need to see from Daniel Ricciardo, didn't it? Really, really enjoyed that fight back.
It was phenomenal. What pace he had, what ability to race, and where's he been? This is a classic. And again, this was a time when he was on a different tyre and had put himself sort of offset on strategy. But that China race, I can't tell you when, 2015 or 2016 or something, when he had a sort of late pit stop at the end, got onto the soft tyres and just blitzed past about 7 cars to take the win. That kind of classic racy Daniel Ricciardo that we know, with a little bit of a error along the way. But yeah, I mean, before that point, I was chatting to the person I was watching the race with, and I was saying it's just, and including the point where he bumped into Tsunoda, that just how hard it is being someone who really likes Daniel Ricciardo. at the moment. But he really turned that around. What a race of two halves for him. And I hope he's able to do a little bit more of this before the end of the season and the rest of his career becomes unknown. Because when Daniel Ricciardo's in his prime, he really is a joy to watch.
A couple of people in chat, actually, Freeze and Max, asking if 10 seconds is a bit harsh for that incident. I think because it ended Yuki's race. I know the FIA don't deal in the outcomes, they deal in the incident, but I think it was a little bit clumsy. It felt a little bit like a half move, and it's ended Tsunoda's race. I feel like 10 seconds is about fair. I don't know if that's in line with other penalties we've seen for incidents similar. It usually tend to see a 5-second penalty, but as it turns out, it doesn't really matter, because if it had been a 5-second penalty, he would have finished 7 seconds up the road from Ocon. He wasn't catching the Ferraris 49 seconds to 39 seconds behind over the line. He was not catching them, so 7th was the best he could do, so it doesn't really matter. But do you think 10 was harsh or about right, Stuart?
It's a funny one, isn't it? Because actually, I think, 10 seconds seems about right. But as you say, on the other hand, if you compare it to other penalties of a sort of similar kind of clumsy half overtake result, sort of, it sort of seems more aligned to a 5-second penalty.
Like Russell last weekend. That was 5 seconds, wasn't it?
I feel like it's rare that we see a 10-second penalty, and maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe they should, Stuart should have the ability to do a sort of a soft penalty and a harder penalty, depending on outcome. I don't know, but it's a funny one. I mean, like I say, on its face, I think that seems perfectly fair, but then it just seems slightly inconsistent with the way they give out penalties anyway. But that's another. That's another little line in the book of the FIA, I guess.
I mean, 5 seconds for Russell last weekend. The only thing I would say is that's turn 1, lap 1. Maybe there's some leniency there. We talked about it last week. Science does move a little bit, doesn't it? We're not getting to that. We did that last weekend. But yeah, I think 10 feels about fair. But it is one of those penalties where if you got 5, you go, yeah, that seems fair. And he gets 10, you go, yeah, that seems fair. He doesn't want to be any more than that. He doesn't want to drive through or anything, but absolutely superb from Danny Ric. Particularly that second, that kind of charge back through the field, because he was having a bit of not a quiet one, because everyone's having a quiet one, but I didn't think he was looking likely for points until he had to fight back like that. So well done to him. And Lando Norris, P9 for him, couple of points, critical in that fight with Alpine for the 4th spot in the championship. As I say, was told to let Ricciardo through for team orders, but I've not got any notes for Norris, Stuart. I don't know if you've written anything down for Lando that I might have missed. I mean, where was he on track? 3.3 clear of Bottas, 4.2 behind Ocon, so kind of a little bit on his own towards the end.
Yeah, not much to say. A bit of a quite disappointing race as Norris goes, I think. He was a little bit anonymous, really, wasn't he? We didn't see too much of him and on what he was up to.
Nick says good move on Bottas for Lando, so that's a good shout. Richard says this doesn't absolve Rick from his poor season or excuse punting Tsunoda off just because he turned up for once and was the highlight of a dual race. Oh God, no! I'm not going to sit here now arguing that Daniel Ricciardo should be back in that McLaren next year, Richard. Not at all. Not on one race. But what's the cliche? You're only as good as your last race. So if he keeps his form up between now and the end of the season, maybe he'll give some teams something to think about for 2024. But no, overall, my review for Daniel Ricciardo's season will be out after the season finishes, but really it's just been a bit pants, really, and very disappointing indeed. Danny Ric deserves 10 seconds, but not 2 points. That's individual 1. And the only thing the FIA and consistency have in common is an eye in the middle, says Greg. Oh, I love that. I might have to steal that one, Greg. Alpine, 8th place for Ocon, DNF for Fernando Alonso. They seem to be involved in quite a few nice little battles. Ocon finishing P8, as I say. Absolutely lovely move around the outside. Lush, as I said last week. Lovely move around the outside of turn 1 on Bottas on lap 42. We've seen a lot of that from Ocon, not necessarily around the outside, but nice and aggressive. But something I didn't note, but it's just come to me now, talking about aggressive. Doesn't he like to park it on the apex of the exit of turn 5 and through 6 and 7? It just seemed it seemed like a few cars nearly went straight into the back of him during that race. He's quite a an interesting one in that, I suppose, defending. It's completely fair. Fernando Alonso, where is he on my notes? I mean, he was looking good. 40 laps on his first set of tyres, moved to the hards. Great first stint, quite frankly. He was involved in a lot, but then lost out suddenly to Ocon and Ricciardo on lap 61. Said, unbelievable, what a season, over team radio, and then pulled over a few laps later at turn 1 and just said engine over team radio. So another reliability problem for Fernando Alonso, and I feel like these outbursts on the radio, if you want to call them outbursts, frustration, I completely sympathise with him. It's got to be frustrating when you turn up, you give it everything you've got, you're putting in a great drive, or a really strong drive at least, and then your team let you down with reliability again. I understand the frustration, but I kind of feel like he can't wait to get in at Aston next season now, Stuart. Because I tell you what, that Aston, it's not always quick this season, but it's fairly reliable, unless I'm missing something huge.
Yeah, and they're definitely improving in the sort of last bit of this season. So hopefully Aston actually do give Alonso something, pretty reasonable to play with next year, because definitely, I mean, on track, at least, he's still hot stuff and, deserves to, fight with the cars around him and go for some real results. I think it'd be very disappointing if he's given a real box or nothing next year and he's just sort of floating around at the back, not really able to get involved in anything or get too many points. So fingers crossed Aston Martin take a step up next year for him. But yeah, what can you say? A bit of a shame for him. I think he was having a good race up to that point. Kind of interesting that they went all the way to lap 40 on the mediums and then went to the hards instead of the softs, because Gasly went to lap 40 and managed to go onto the softs. So yeah, interesting choice, but maybe Alpine didn't think their car was able to manage softs for that long. But I mean, it didn't matter anyway because he retired. Again, yeah. So it looks like he's going to finish behind Ocon in the standings, but had more bad luck than Ocon. And as for Ocon, yeah, good race from him. He's kind of nicely aggressive, isn't he, Ocon? And hopefully that's going to do him well transitioning into next year and becoming, if not officially, but hopefully taking the reins of that team, being team leader and hopefully taking himself as a driver to the next level, because this is going to be sort of perhaps a little bit more break in terms of where his career goes from here. So very interested in seeing seeing Ocon as he goes forward.
Yeah, and I'm thinking back to the start of the season actually on reliability. I seem to recall in testing, could have been a bit after that, but we may have discussed it in testing. It was a while ago now. Lots happened since then. But I seem to recall there was some conversation about how the Renault power unit this year, they found the speed, but they were lacking the reliability. And we discussed that in pre-season, but it's definitely kind of come true, hasn't it, in the season? I mean, where is Fernando Alonso? I mean, I don't know, these aren't all reliability necessarily, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 retirements this year. Ocon has had 2 by comparison, not all reliability, but that was kind of the word, wasn't it, in pre-season testing, was that they had the speed but not the reliability. So maybe it was to be expected, I don't know, but hopefully they can get on top of that next year, and it gives Gasly and Ocon a chance to fight, because I'm with you. I'm really fascinated to see if Ocon can lead that team, and also fascinated to see if Gasly might just walk in there and take the reins and off he goes. That'll be because Gasly's led AlphaTauri for a few seasons, or a couple of seasons now, hasn't he? So he's done that. So he might walk in and it's going to be really exciting. Really looking forward to that. And I'm maybe one of the few, but I'm really looking forward to Alonso versus Stroll as well. I don't know what it is, but there's something about that I'm really looking forward to. But yeah, I think good race from Alonso, good race from Ocon, not a great race from Alpine on Alonso's side of the garage in the end. Alfa Romeo, nice to be able to talk to them nice and early in this one. Valtteri Bottas, what a lap yesterday in qualifying. I mean, he got that absolutely bang on. So I've got to say, whilst P10 is a nice point, I'm a little bit disappointed for Bottas. I feel like there could have been more there. Only 0.6 clear of Gasly as well over the line, so it was quite close there. 39 laps on his first stint as well, so he ran nice and long, so that kind of worked out for him. Do you know what I mean, though? Great lap yesterday. Started, he split the Ferraris, for goodness sake. I mean, that's brilliant for Bottas. And I kind of expected a little bit more today, but it just... Race pace not there. I think I heard something pre-weekend or during practice that Bottas has said that focusing on quali was the key because that worked for them last time, so that's what they went for this weekend, and maybe that hurt them a bit in the race. I don't know, but it was close, wasn't it, in that kind of McLaren, Alpine, Alfa Romeo battle today?
Yeah, and he lost out off the start. He was a couple of places behind the Ferraris by the end of the first lap. So that, if I remember correctly, but that didn't help him at all. Otherwise, fairly solid from him, and we've seen the Alfa Romeo dip from that kind of quite strong position that it was in early in the season, and now it's sort of floating back up again, and Bottas is able to kind of get back among it and sort of do some giant killing that he's used to. And I was thinking during this race, I think he got himself up behind Alonso and was involved in that little battle there. And I sort of found myself thinking, you can't help but like Bottas. You kind of root for him, and he's involved in battle. He's just, there's nothing unsavory about him at all, really. You just like him. He's been really a pleasure to watch this season in particular when he's got into that Alfa Romeo and actually done some really good stuff with it. So, I think good race from him, apart from the kind of start that kind of left him wanting, and maybe it wasn't the fastest strategy available, but he did some good stuff. Interesting to see how he and the team develop over the next year.
Yeah, Clansome just saying there in chat. Good evening, mate. Says Ferrari engine is in the Alpha, let them down today. Maybe Ferrari have asked others to turn theirs down as well. We shall see. Thank you, by the way, to Lewis. Sorry, my Streamlabs has just updated. Thank you to Lewis for your super chat earlier. Really appreciate that, mate. Says it's tough to be Tifosi. I'm so sorry. Bless you. It's not been a great second half of the season for Ferrari, has it? But hopefully they'll bounce back next season. So thank you very much for that, Lewis. Massively appreciated. Zhou Guanyu finally pitted, end of lap 46. I think he was the last one as well. So he went properly long. So clearly... I mean, I can't help but feel that Pirelli maybe went too conservative this weekend on their tyres. I feel like they maybe could have gone with the softest options in the end to maybe make... And even then, I think the one-stopper was still very doable. Did consider the Ricciardo move, as I'm calling it, on Tsunoda, but backed out. That was on Vettel, by the way. Tried the move on Vettel, backed out of it. Really nice move on Vettel outside of turn 1, though, and then up the inside of turn 2 towards the end. So good racing from Zhou. Only P13, though, 11.1 behind Alex Albon in the end. Maybe just a case of race pace not there in the Alpha, but not horrendous from Zhou, but not anything really to write home about, unless you've got something amazing there, Stuart. We might just roll straight on to the next team. No offense to Zhou, but P13 isn't thrilling to discuss, if I'm being honest. In a race where not a lot happened anyway.
No, he definitely didn't appear in my very, very scant notes that I had in front of me. Yeah. No, not really much to add. He was there. He was there in Mexico City.
Individual one says apparently Ferrari had heating issues in chat. So maybe that's the thing as well that's been passed on to Alfa and perhaps Haas as well, because they were poor today. We'll get onto them shortly. Very briefly, we'll get onto them. So maybe that's something in there. So thank you very much for mentioning that one in chat. AlphaTauri, Tsunoda, we've talked about the incident with Ricciardo. Wasn't really a million miles away from fighting with people, but not really much ahead of that one, so frustrating. The DNF, by the way, was right rear damage, apparently, was what Com said, and then you could see on replays and footage that the side pod had a hole in it as well, so that was game over for him. He did get back to the pits, though, to try, but it's just not going to happen for it. Pierre Gasly, probably one of the more eventful races, along with Daniel Ricciardo, banging wheels with Stroll on lap 10 at turn 1, then on lap 13 at turn 4, tried to make a move on Lance Stroll, locked up. They both went wide off the track. He did not give the place back, and I think fairly got a 5-second time penalty, but actually he was so quick at that point, he built about a 3.8 second lead over Lance Stroll. So, and then Stroll pitted as well, so actually it would have been worse if he'd taken the penalty, so it was better actually to give the position. It's better to take the penalty than to give the position back, so he may as well just carried on. Served it during his pit stop and ended up P11, just 0.6 of a second off a point. So actually not a bad day for Gasly, despite banging wheels and running people off track and getting penalties. So actually a terrible day, I suppose. But yeah, not bad from Pierre, but overall, disappointing weekend in what feels like a really disappointing season for AlphaTauri, to be honest.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? And that penalty thing, I was really unsure how to feel about it. Much more unsure than I was about Daniel Ricciardo's penalty, because I don't know if it sets a precedent or whatever, but it kind of it kind of meant, oh, you can sort of just barge someone out of the way if you're fast enough to pull out 5 seconds on them to make it worth it. If you know what I mean? It seems like I don't know. It just means if you know you can pull out a 5 second gap on someone, you can just feel like you can barge them out of the way.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So I just felt a bit like weird about it. Because actually, technically, there was I can't actually remember exactly what the result of the battle was behind him was, but Pierre was momentarily in danger of having to like let 2 cars through. Because the when he overtook Stroll was then falling back into the clasp of the Williams, and it was all a bit. So yeah, I don't know. It was a little bit uncomfortable about that, because I don't. This is a bit more of an overall kind of overarching point, but one of the problems I think with penalties that have a definite cost to them is you can do a bit of cost benefit analysis and just decide whether to do something illegal because you can afford it. If you know what I mean, the same way as like, if you're rich, then parking tickets are just the cost for parking, aren't they? They're not a deterrent. If you know what I mean. And if you're fast enough to not race someone properly, you can just race them improperly and take the penalty if you know you can get away with it. So I don't know. And maybe that was someone who maybe should have got a 10-second penalty because of the sort of effect it would have had as a deterrent. I don't know. I'm sort of talking about this too much, but that was just my thought.
No, I think that's fair, because somebody in chat said maybe they should have been forced. Max says maybe should have been forced to give the position back, but kind of the only way you can force a driver to give a position back is to black flag him, I suppose. And pull them out of the race. They don't have to, do they? And you've got to, I guess, like a tactical foul in football or something like that, where the strikers. Sorry, Stuart, I've gone into football. There you go. The striker's got away, and the defender just pulls him back and gets a yellow card. Yeah, it's something that you kind of, the penalty's fair, but you sort of look at it and go, it doesn't feel fair. I totally know what you mean. It is fair and it's the right penalty, but it doesn't feel like it should be, because he's managed to build that gap. Because I'm just going to repeat what you say, so I completely agree. Let's not get into F1 and penalties too much, because we'll be here all day with that one. Because let's face it, it's yeah.
Although I will say he did get a penalty point, which takes him up to 10. So it's not. It says 1 according to the stewards document I got, but nonetheless, that is pushing him up towards something bigger. I guess that's the only thing that he can't get away with.
Yeah, because it's only going to take one collision, isn't it, with another driver that he's deemed to have caused for a race ban? Because that's usually about 2 penalty points. He's going to be careful. I don't know how long. I think it's early next year they come off, or next season. But he's still going to have to be careful for the last 2 races. Yeah,
and beyond.
Yeah,
I don't know when the first penalty point runs out.
Raul says Miami, 11 penalty points till Miami. So,
well, that's significant, isn't it?
Quite a way away. So we could be looking at a race ban for. If anyone doesn't know, by the way, if a driver accrues 12 penalty points in the course of 12 months, they will get a race ban. So we shall see. Evening, John T. Yeah, Jonty's review is perfect. Oh, hey, so a race happens. See you for Brazil. That's basically what the stream should have been, but we'll still manage to waffle away. Please do leave a like, by the way. 861 of you here, 273 likes so far. We're trying to get to 500 for Charles Edward Cheese. I didn't think we could do it, but prove me wrong. Prove me wrong, people. Please do drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe as well. 2 more races to go in 2022. I know a few people I've spoken to can't wait for it to be over because the championships are done, but hopefully Brazil next. Brazil tends to be cracking, so you'll enjoy that one. Let's get through the rest of this field then. Williams, Albon P12 today, and Nicholas Latifi. I can't see him on the timing screen, so I assume somewhere down the back. Sorry, Nicholas Latifi. Yeah, I mean, they were there, weren't they? Albon, you said there, Stuart was kind of in that little battle with Lance Stroll at one point. Came home 1.8 seconds behind Gasly, 11 seconds clear of Zhou, so pretty comfortably, I guess, in P12, but I've got nothing in my notes for him. And Nicholas Latifi had a slow-ish first stop at 3.5 seconds. That is literally all I have for Nicholas Latifi's race. And I have nothing for Albon, so I guess 100% more notes for Latifi's race than Albon's, which I guess tells you how great that was. Got anything, Stuart, at all? I'll have a look at the press releases and see if there's anything we've missed.
I mean, partway through that race, I was hoping Latifi would do the decent thing and have a little accident into the wall, bring a safety car out. You know, that's kind of what he's here for this season, isn't it? Just spice up the race a little bit. He wasn't doing much else, was he? So, yeah. A classic Williams race, wasn't it, really?
Yeah, Latifi 2 laps down as well. The only driver 2 laps down. 58 seconds off he had a second pit stop. So there you go. Latifi had a second pit stop, which is about 21, 22 seconds, something like that. So still 30 seconds or so off Magnussen.
It's not good, is
it? A long way off, isn't it? I'm sorry. I'm not doing it to be horrible about Latifi. I honestly just was quite taken back by how big that gap was. Weirdly,
I mean, you can kind of see why Williams have given the seat to someone who may or may not have the super license points to take it.
Well, I kind of feel like, and by the way, if this comes back to bite me in the backside this time next year, then fair enough. But I kind of feel like you may as well put Logan Sargent in the car because he's probably not going to do any worse, and he's going to get better because he's a young driver and develop, in theory. So it makes sense. But yeah, kind of just the press release isn't in yet. If it comes through later in the race, I'll have a look and see if there's anything going on. But Williams P12 for Albon and P18 for Latifi. That leaves us with Aston Martin. I talked about the wheel banging between Gasly and Stroll. I think Stroll was a 2-stopper as well today, possibly. Yes, he was. So kind of not really anything there for him. 10.4 seconds behind his teammate. Sebastian Vettel ran long, 38 laps on the softs. 38 laps on the softs. I'll try that again. Moved on to the mediums. Really fun fight with Zhou. That's what I wanted to say as well for Zhou Guanyu. Really nice little fight between those two during that race. And yeah, I've got very little on Aston Martin, except for really frustrated by their lack of pace this weekend. And although Bottas only scored a point in what is a very close fight between those two teams, that could be a critical point. There's a 4-point gap now in the Constructors' Championship between Alfa Romeo and Aston Martin. But I felt like all the momentum was with Aston, and it's kind of gone away this weekend. So hopefully it's track specific and we get a great cracking fight between Aston Martin and Alfa Romeo for the final 2 races this season, because actually outside of Alpine v McLaren, that's all there is, isn't it, really, in the Constructors is Aston versus Alfa. Or maybe AlphaTauri versus Haas. There's only a point in that one, to be fair.
And I feel like this. I think what Mexico is a bit of an outlier anyway. It's a little bit weird in terms of how it affects cars and the performance levels and the thin atmosphere and all. You know, I don't think teams who have momentum and stuff aren't necessarily. If Aston had a dip here, it might not necessarily be indicative of where they are. So there's 2 races and a sprint left to go to gather points. So that battle's still very much on, as is the AlphaTauri Haas. Yeah. I mean, there's, in terms of that kind of lower midfield thing, that's going to be an interesting thing to watch, and I hope the TV director realizes that, and that we get to see some of it. That's where my eyes are going to be, as well as the can Mercedes actually pull off a miracle and gather 40 points over Ferrari.
Yeah. Lance Stroll did have a great start, by the way. He starts his press release by saying he had a great start. It's a great start to his press release and the race. I don't know how many places he gained off the line, but I think he was about, well, funnily enough, I think he was about 14th, 15th, and he ended up 15th. So he kind of had a great start, and that was kind of it if you look at his race from that point of view. But a few other things happened.
Jonty says 5 places in the comments.
There you go then. Thank you, Jonty. Statman. We'll call you Statman. On the move with Pierre Gasly, he says that he braked late, passed me, but did not give me any room. However, it would not have really changed our day had it not happened. There was fun moments out there. there were fun moments out there, surely, passing other cars, but we struggled a lot with our pace and the tyres. We will try to understand the dip in performance and see how we can make progress to maximise the final 2 races of the season. And Sebastian Vettel says, overall, we were just a little bit too slow today. At the start of the race, I could hold on to the cars in front of me, but then I was a bit unlucky to get tangled up with Yuki Tsunoda. His car was damaged, and he came back onto the track in front of me. I lost too much time and was an easy target for the others. So there you go. That's where he lost his time there. Car didn't feel great. The afternoon was a bit of a struggle. So there we go. That's Sebastian Vettel's line on that one. And Williams have just sent the press release out, so thanks to Williams. Alex Albert says, really happy with today. I'm going to read that again because I don't feel like it says, honestly, I'm really happy with today, and it feels like our pace was relatively strong from where it was on Friday. We had a tricky start, so we dropped to 19th, and despite a few retirements, we overtook everyone else, so I think it was a good race from us. It was a thermal race with the dirty air making the brakes hot, and then the tyres hot, so we did well with our strategy to find the gaps in clean air. Nicholas Latif said we had some car damage from early on in the race, which was confirmed by the team. At the beginning, it didn't seem too bad. It didn't seem too bad a race. Yeah, so damage for Latifi, just a quick flick through there. 2 or 3 seconds a lap slower on new soft tyres compared to people on older softs. Overall, a really lonely day. So damage there for Latifi accounts for perhaps some of that time. So yeah, sorry, I'm just quite surprised Albon had a good day, but I suppose only 1.8 seconds off Gasly. So that's only 3 seconds? No, 2.5 seconds off a point. Actually, that's a fair point, actually. Yeah, that's a fair point. So not bad from Albon at all. I guess is my point in there. Who have we got left? Who have we got left? We've done Seb, we've done Stroll. So just the Haas boys. Mick Schumacher beat Magnussen today by 1.5 seconds. He was 16th, 9 seconds behind Lance Stroll. Kevin Magnussen in 17th place.
Amazing. Good stuff. Haas, just don't understand them at the moment. Very confusing team. Really thought, if we wind back, 400 races to the beginning of this season, we were talking a lot. They took 2 years off essentially development for this year, and it looked like it was paying off, and they were strong and sort of upper midfield. Everything was coming strong. Magnussen was great. They were getting regular points, and it that really didn't last that long, did it? Before they were sort of falling into the lower midfield and then kind of back to not the tragic 2020, 2019-ness of all, but it's, I don't know. It seems a shame, doesn't it? They weren't able to sustain that for very long.
Yeah. But I kind of had that fear at the start of the season that they would end up being outdeveloped this year. But it's just very strange, isn't it? How much they've fallen away from where they were, and I kind of feel like that. I'm not saying Mick Schumacher's been amazing this year, but I kind of feel like that's making him appear worse than he is. Because if you look at, a lot of people would turn around and often say in chat or in comment sections and things that I read on Twitter, you should never read replies, but I still do. We're looking and go, Kevin Magnussen's got 24 points and Mick Schumacher's only got 12. It's like, yeah, but Kevin was doing that when the car was battling for points, as you say, Stuart, pretty consistently. I mean, he scored at 3 of the opening 4 races, then did nothing for 5 races, scored for a couple of races, and did nothing until the USA. So it's not like it's a consistent scorer, whereas, Mick was sticking it in the wall early season when he had his chance to score points. But I don't think that tells the story of the second half of this season. I think if you'd have put Mick Schumacher's second half of the season in the first half when that car was more capable, he'd have scored a lot more points. If you see what I've got to there, I don't know if that made any sense at all.
No, yeah, I do. There was a real sweet spot where that car was capable of picking up a lot of points, and Mick, one way or another, was not picking up the points in that part of the season. So he's only able to sort of, he's finishing the points twice right in the middle of the season, and it's sort of an 8th and a 6th place, which is kind of the same kind of points that Kevin's been picking up ever since. So bad timing in terms of Mick Schumacher getting his act together and not crashing.
Yeah, hopefully a better season next season. And I'm going to say it for about the 15th stream in a row. if the options next year are Mick Schumacher and Nico Hulkenberg, I'm taking Mick Schumacher. Thank you for I Played D Sharp Minor for your super chat. Or thank you to Played D Sharp Minor for your super chat. Says, quick word from Martin Brundle, who would shove a microphone into a Marty Brad Pitt's face, get ignored, and then get hit on as a result next weekend. So thank you very much for your super chat. Massively appreciated. Yeah, he did get Marty Brad Pitt, and then he met his number one fan, didn't he, on the grid? So that was quite nice to see. That's when I start tuning into Sky now, actually. Grid walk time. I don't bother with the rest of it. We'll get into that at some point, I'm sure. If not today, definitely another day. But driver of the day, I think, is where we're at. One surname, chat. Who have you got for your driver of the day? Danny Rick won the official driver of the day. I'll keep saying driver of the day until I get there. Who have you gone with, Stuart? I kind of feel like this is a little bit tough because I don't know. It feels tough.
And maybe my reasoning here is going to be the same thing you were going to say, is that there was one driver who brought this race to life, but he also crashed into Tsunoda.
Exactly.
You know, and I was saying this during the race. I just can't. I was saying I know I'm gonna have to give an answer for Sean for driver of the day, but I just don't think I can give it to Ricardo because I don't know if I can give a driver of the day to someone who did punt someone out of the race halfway through, despite suddenly turning into an absolute beast. So I'm probably going to quite boringly give it to Max Verstappen, who was just very fast. And I think sometimes you just got to give it to the guy who wins the race. And also, you know, it's a tip of the hat to beating a record, getting 14 race wins in a single season. I think that's worth acknowledging as well. Was under pressure in the first stint, even though that maybe didn't last. That was only 20 laps out of 70. Yeah, I'm going to give it to Max Verstappen because it was a very clean, error-free, solid race, much faster than anyone else, including his teammate in the same car. So yeah, Verstappen. But I would have given it to Ricciardo if he had managed to keep it clean.
Yeah, see, I want to give it to Ricciardo. That's where I want it to be because, as you say, he kept that race interesting. But my rule is, if you take another drive for my rule, it's my rule for my driver of the day. If you take another driver out and get a penalty, then you shouldn't get driver of the day. But it's really hard not to give it to him. So we've both said that we probably would give it to Daniel Ricciardo, but under our stream rules, you've gone with Max Verstappen. I think Max Verstappen's a fair shout because he's 15.1 up the road, really long stint on those tyres as well. Looked pretty much untouchable in the end, didn't he? So I think that's fair. But Hamilton as well drove well to keep Perez at bay, had good pace despite the struggles on the hard tyre and the sliding. I think that's a good shout. So I suppose he could get that one. But see, I probably, if I'm not going Ricciardo, I'd probably say Verstappen. But you went Verstappen, so I'd probably say Hamilton. But I'm also tempted to say Esteban Ocon because if we're looking at drivers who did something entertaining, well, Ocon did have some nice moments, really nice move around the outside of, I've forgotten who it was now, but somebody at turn one, some nice defence as well. So I suppose you could throw him in there, but it's tough. It's a tough one, definitely. I'll probably have to say Verstappen. I'd just say the same as you. It's the boring answer, but also it's a fair answer if we're not giving it to Ricciardo. But I think deep down inside, that's who we both want to give it to, is Danny Rick. Dell doesn't care. Yeah. He's giving it to Ricciardo. Abril Scrub says Ricciardo. Papacheco says Mario. Falling Vega says Ricciardo. Individual One says Max. Greg says Ricciardo. KMS Boss says Albano. He was happy with his race. And actually, on reflection, I think we both think he had a better race than we initially thought. Danny Rick, my pick from last week, says Elijah. Nick has gone with Ricciardo. Raul's gone with Max. Vinit said Max as well. Freezer's gone with Verstappen. Thomas has gone with Ricciardo. Fanta Boy Albon. Keep scrolling down a little bit. Ross Chastain's cropping up in the chat. I have no idea what that's about. I'm going to have a guess at NASCAR?
Oh, that clip.
Is it? Yeah. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm punting it in American Series.
Did you see that NASCAR clip that was going around the same time with his race?
I did not. But I will try and I'll have a look for it after the stream.
Yeah. Fascinating. It was quite something.
It's going to be Danny Rick. Who else? Max says DRD. Nobody. Leclerc 100% is a good one. Nick Debris. Yes. That was quite amusing, wasn't it? Over Team Radio.
Yeah.
Thomas says Ricardo. Another biased British channel. How bizarre. Well, you're deluded and haven't been here before, so do one. Perez because Mexico, says James. Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe battery Voltas. That's a Twitter account, isn't it? Battery Voltas. I'm sure there's one out there. Hulkenberg driver of the day for Girl Web, and apparently I was right. It was NASCAR. Nice one. Yes, I know you said that as well. Thomas says Alonso as well is a fair shout. So yeah.
Okay.
Nah, I can see it because, to be fair, Alonso was racing really well up until it all kind of fell apart with reliability. I don't think, if we look at driver of the day, I don't think he did anything wrong, but I probably wouldn't put him up there as my driver of the day. I mean, there's no rule that you have to finish, I guess is my argument there, but yeah. I don't know. If you have any questions, please do pop them in chat and we'll answer a few. We did that, Stuart, according to my stream, in an hour. We never get through the field in an hour.
Record.
And I feel like we could have cut that to
really
half.
Speaks to the race, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, some teams we just skipped over in about a minute. That's the kind of... it speaks to kind of probably both the race and the TV direction, because I feel like there might have been some more stuff going on than we really focused on. But yeah, that's probably a conversation we don't need to necessarily get into right now.
Dell said we missed Tsunoda. I'm sure we did Tsunoda, didn't we? Talked about the crash with Ricardo. I've crossed him off.
Yeah, you did. You said you didn't have too much to say on him, other than the crash. He was sort of there. He was there.
Yeah, talked about his damage as well, didn't I? His side pod damage, his right rear damage. So we kind of got over him when we were talking about Ricardo crashing into him, really. But that was kind of the highlight, if you want to call it that, of his race. Yeah, so I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll go to the question that came in earlier, actually, to be fair, from DRD Nobody. Just our opinion on the Verstappen's Sky boycott and Sky's comments on Perez. As a Brit myself, is getting obvious by the day. Why can't they let 2021 go? I've not heard the comments on Perez. So if anybody knows, interrupt me, Stuart, if you know, but if anybody knows in chat, then, or if you want to elaborate on that, DRD, pop it in chat and I'll keep an eye out for you. I've not seen the Perez comments, but the boycott, I mean, Verstappen and Red Bull can do what they like, I suppose, but
so I'll give you, because you probably were, I noticed something while you were talking earlier on Twitter, because Max Verstappen elaborated on it. So there's a few little articles about it. But Verstappen said his decision to stop speaking to them was not triggered by a single incident. Quote, "It's nothing to do with this weekend, but this year it's been a constant kind of digging, being disrespectful, especially one particular person. At one point, it's enough. I don't accept it. You can't live in the past. You have to move on." And he said Sky's coverage has provoked hostility towards his team on social media and so on. And also, Christian Horner said the boycott has ended now. So from Brazil, they'll be back on the pit wall, I'm sure, and in every single interview in every session. So that was Verstappen's take on it.
I mean,
I don't know who that one person is, but it seems like it might be Ted Kravitz based on everything we've heard so far.
See, my issue with Ted, and I love Ted, I don't know anybody who doesn't really, and even those who are angry with him now, I think they'll be over it in a couple of weeks because he's just so bloody brilliant. But my issue with Ted is that he said in Bahrain, let's never speak of Abu Dhabi again, let's draw a line under it, and then he's proceeded to bring it up pretty much every notebook. So it's kind of like, Ted, pick a, if you want to talk about it every week, mate, that's fine, but don't keep telling us to stop talking about it and then keep talking about it. There'll be a lot of people that don't let and will never let 2021 go, and to be honest, I kind of get that for them. I mean, I know from there's things that I still won't let go now about Michael Schumacher, and he retired first time at the end of 2006, and then again at the end of 2012. So I was a Michael Schumacher fanboy. I always will be. So I'm always going to have that bias there. So there will be Lewis Hamilton fans that will never let 2021 go, and there'll be F1 fans that will never let 2021 go. But from a broadcast perspective, I do sort of agree with Max that if you're gonna bang on about it every weekend, people are going to get riled up, and that's going to set social media off. And we all know it only takes a fart in the wrong direction to set Twitter off sometimes. You're going to set people off, and then they are going to start targeting the poor social media admin at Red Bull who do nothing except turn up and tweet. They don't do the cost cap. They weren't responsible for what happened in Abu Dhabi. They just turn up to do their jobs and get absolute abuse for it. And I just don't think there's any place for that. So I completely understand what you're saying, but I think we've had this conversation before. I don't. There does feel like a lot of bias at Sky, but they're British broadcasters being biased towards British drivers, which is no different. Stick with me. It's no different to Dutch media being biased towards Verstappen, Italian media being biased towards Ferrari, Spanish media being biased towards Alonso, except that the Sky UK coverage goes out to a lot of places worldwide. So I do think that they should be allowed to have some bias in the same way that, if you're watching the World Cup, if England score a goal, then the English commentators are going to go mad. I think that's fine. But they also should be a bit more self-aware that people in America are watching, or Australia are all over, and maybe they don't have that same bias towards British drivers. If you follow what I'm saying, I'm not calling them out for that, because they have every right to be as a British broadcaster, but my issue with Sky really is, I think, honestly, their coverage this year has been very disappointing, full stop. I used to watch every minute of it, ITV, BBC, when it first went to Sky in 2012. As soon as it started, I'd be there for the titles. I'd be there until the end credits of the post-race show. But now I turn up half an hour, 15 minutes before, and then just get straight into the race, because I'm just not in. I just find it, I've said it to you so many times, Stuart, it's like I've got word of the day toilet paper and I've just stuck with this word, but I just find it all very hyperbolic, and I'm just not interested in that. And they always seem desperate for people to get penalties, but only specific people, and I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know if you've seen the video that was circulating on social media of Ted yesterday, but I watched that video and I did find myself kind of been like, almost waiting for the controversy, and then the video starts again, and I'm like, okay, I don't see it. What's he lied about in that comment? If he'd come out and said Max Verstappen's trash, absolute rubbish, doesn't deserve last year's title, yeah, tear him apart. But to state a fact, I don't think that's all that controversial. That's me getting cancelled in the comments.
I think so you made a lot of points there, and I think your point about bringing it up frequently and the effect that has on fan bases across social media and the way they direct their anger, I think is all very, very valid, and I think particularly very valid in the way people have to learn to. I mean, whatever Ted says and whatever Sky say, they've got some responsibility, but I do think people online need to just learn to behave themselves better and not direct their anger at people. And every social media account, whether they're an organization's social media account or a personal one, has a person running it who will see all your things. And I know people who are social media managers for brand accounts, and it does hit them hard when they get an onslaught of abuse or whatever, even if it's actually directed at the brand or whatever, because it just comes through at them. And I think if you're the kind of person who directs their anger at things, maybe just have a little think about the fact that this actual people have to read that and will take it personally, and it does have an effect. And also, I think that extends wider. I think a few races. Well, was it Dutch Grand Prix that Simone, I can't remember her name, but the strategist at Red Bull got a lot of
yes, I know what you mean,
abuse because they thought there was conspiracy with AlphaTauri to cause Sonoda to break down, all that kind of stuff. I mean, people need to stop doing that. And I think, yes, to a certain degree, Sky have to, and any broadcaster, actually, Ziggo Sport, whoever's, running ESPN, whoever, needs to be aware of what they say has an effect on who watches it and what they may go on to do, even though I think there is a responsibility in you as a viewer and a social media user in how you react to that. And I think you're absolutely right that, I mean, you hit it on the head. Yeah. If you're British broadcasters, then you're going to have some bias and you're going to cheer on, the local team, but they are also the sort of default voice of Formula One. So they have a responsibility to that as well. I don't think they're as biased as people seem to think they are. Like, I think they do at least make an attempt to kind of be balanced, even if it's a sort of a failed attempt. I watched that clip of Ted, and I think it was very mild, and maybe it's more of an attrition thing, as Verstappen is saying. It's sort of like it being kind of constant, because actually I think the context in which Ted said what he said, in which he alluded to Abu Dhabi 2021 being robbed from Lewis, but in the context of what he was saying, what he was describing was it would be as a sort of narrative for this weekend if Hamilton was able to get a win over, I can't remember exactly how he described it, but he talked about like the one who had the win taken from him being able to take it back again this weekend or something like that. It was sort of, he was describing it as a sort of narrative rather than actually just going on about Lewis Hamilton being robbed. And he said it was like half a sentence. It wasn't anything he dwelled on or anything.
He wasn't sulking in a corner, was he? He was making a point.
No, I think this is all a little bit overblown, but maybe that, it sounds like it was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. And to be honest, we've spoken about this before, like whatever happened in Abu Dhabi was not Max Verstappen's fault at all. And if you're Max Verstappen and that's your very first driver's title, however it was won, and just you're constantly having it undermined, I think that's incredibly demoralizing. And I'm sure you can just be like, I'm just fed up with this now. I don't want to talk to this guy this weekend. I can kind of understand that as well. So, I think there's a lot of hyperbole and things that are being overblown and stuff. And I think just people are being quite emotional. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think, you can be emotional and you can take things and need to just take a break from the people who are stressing you out or whatever. But yeah, I think this was just like an accumulation of a lot of things that just sort of came to a head one weekend.
It's good to know that Max has confirmed that it wasn't a specific thing, because if it was over that one video, then that's really silly. Because again, Ted hasn't said anything about Max not deserving the championship. He stated a fact, and everybody who's listening to this or watches this later, just drop your own biases for a second and just look at it and say, well, actually, had the rules been followed in Abu Dhabi, Lewis Hamilton would have won the World Championship. So he was robbed by the FIA and by the stewards. Max Verstappen didn't rob him. Max Verstappen, and I said this after the race actually, Max Verstappen was handed an opportunity and he rightly took it with both hands and won the World Championship. Don't criticise Max and blame Max for that. The criticism should be at how that opportunity was given to him, not that he took it. And that's what I've always said. So I think it's all, just back to the point, it's all a little bit silly, but I can also understand, as you said, Stuart, if you've just won, you've won your first World Championship and you have to constantly hear, oh, you was robbed, and then other people, not Ted, but other people saying, oh, he doesn't deserve it on Twitter. You're going to get to a point where you go, oh, do you know what? I don't want to talk to anybody. Leave me alone. So I completely understand, but it's all silly. I mean, we all get accused of bias. I'm accused of British bias all the time. Yet I've said many times on this channel, I don't support a British driver. I don't even support the England national team, so I don't quite know where the British bias thing comes from. I'm very much, for reasons I'll not go into, very much more about Germany than I have anything else. I support them in football, than I was a massive Michael Schumacher fan. So there you go. Yeah, I kind of feel like it helps with the channel a little bit, Stuart, that I've not got a bias towards a Lewis Hamilton or a Max Verstappen. I can sit back and enjoy, and it is much more enjoyable. I know that Red Raven, he's not here tonight, but he'll be mad at me in the comments talking about it again, but it is very nice to just log off Twitter and watch a race and not even look at it. I've got to be honest, it is lovely to sit back and enjoy that. But we'll move on from that topic. A few super chats came in, so thank you so much to everyone who dropped a super chat. Random Bosman says, saying this right now, if people haven't gotten over 1989, 1994, how do you think people are going to get over 2021 easily? That's a very fair point, and I tend to agree as well. Also goes on to say people still have anger for Canada 2019, let alone Abu Dhabi 2021. Absolutely, there's a few examples I could probably come up with for you in another stream, maybe over the winter, of things that still annoy me about my time supporting Michael Schumacher. But thank you very much for your super chats, mate. Pascal says, hi Sean and Stuart, happy with 1 point for Alfa Romeo Sauber, could be crucial. I hope my team Sauber can finish it off now. Thank you very much, mate. You'll have to let me know in chat, not another super chat, but in chat, how you're feeling about the Audi stake. Audi buying a stake in the team for the future. Very exciting. And Greg says, with Mastership's recent passing and De Vries joining in 23, no faith in the junior academy. Could you see AlphaTauri being sold before 2026? Thank you very much, Greg. That's a good question. I mean, Porsche looking for a way in. Andretti. Actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Stuart, but there was I mean, maybe even did it on stream, but there was a rumour doing the rounds a few weeks ago that Andretti kind of want to buy AlphaTauri if Red Bull decide they want to let it go. So maybe if they've not got the faith in the junior academy, perhaps see how Liam Lawson and co get on next year and make a decision from there. But that could be a way in for Andretti. And, you know, I'll make the point for the millionth time on this channel. I'd prefer Andretti to come in with an 11th team. But, I mean, that's a way for them, isn't it, potentially?
Yeah, I mean, we know how keen they are generally. And they've... the way the sort of the route to entry is at the moment, and how prohibitively expensive it is to make an 11th team, I think taking over an existing team is the smoothest way to go, and that could be it. You know, it's all very speculative at the moment. But as an overall kind of response to that, I'm interested to see how the Red Bull kind of you know, the whole Red Bull Racing family approach changes now. Mateschitz has gone, and whether they sort of focus on the, you know, senior team now. I mean, or whether they still find it really useful having an AlphaTauri there to kind of move drivers through. It'll be interesting to see if their approach changes going forward, or whether they're going to sort of stick with the plan. Yeah, we will see.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Just on the mention of Mastershits, actually, the helmet that Seb ran this weekend, it's a really lovely idea, but I found it quite jarring seeing that Red Bull helmet in an Aston Martin. Okay, that just seems odd. They've got a Red Bull Junior in the car. What's happened? But that was a nice touch from Seb. We're not going to go into it too much. But M Harati says, "What are your opinions on the cost cap breach?" We're not going to go into it too much because number one, we talked about it last Sunday, and number two, I think people are sick to the back teeth of hearing about it, to be honest. But all I will say is on the penalties, and I've said this to a few people as well. It feels about right. You maybe could have stuck a little bit more on the wind tunnel time restrictions or whatever, or the aero restrictions, the aero testing restrictions, but that feels about right. It's going to be interesting how much it hampers them, Stuart, but we'll not know until next season. So I think really, I mean, you can obviously have your opinion on it as well, mate, but I feel like we're at a point now where it's time to, and it's something Ted said yesterday, actually, treat it as any FIA penalty. They broke the rules, they got a penalty, let's move on. That's it now. It's dealt with. But can we try and get the process down a little bit next year? I know it's not easy, but I don't want to be having this conversation at next year's Mexico City Grand Prix weekend.
Yeah, I did think about this quite a bit because it's new territory, isn't it? And I think it being new territory is one of those things that makes it a bit tricky, because this is you know, cost cap is a brand new thing, and penalties related to cost cap. This is sort of a litmus test. And I'm so one thing is I kind of wish the costs, the financial penalty, the fine came out of the cost cap, but you know, it's not that big a deal to me. In terms of the restriction on the sort of R&D side, the wind tunnel and the CFD stuff, I think that's interesting. I think that's not insignificant at all, and it's going to be very hard to fully appreciate how much of a hindrance that is going to be to them, and when that hindrance sort of comes into play, because that's going to affect them sort of going from second half of next season through to, I guess, 2024, really. So it's a sort of, it's a very long-winded process. They breached the cost gap in 2021, and they're going to see we're going to sort of see the effects of it play out at the latter half of 2023 and into 2024. It's a weird one, and I think it's very hard to say how fair it is. It's very hard to say how much of effect it actually had on their 2021, and how much of effect the penalty is going to have on them. You know, it's a really intangible thing. It's not as easy as saying, Ricciardo pushed someone out of the race, and so he got a 10-second penalty, and we can all see how that plays out pretty quickly and pretty effectively. So I don't have too much problem with it. I think it seems about right. They didn't completely blow the butt. They didn't. I mean, it was that less than 5% or less than 5 million or whatever it was. So yeah, I think it feels about right. I think there's going to be a lot of people left unsatisfied with it, but I think, as we sort of discussed last weekend, the whole process is kind of very unsatisfying because it takes so long, and it's kind of a tricky one to implement. But I think having a 10% reduction in wind tunnel time is a deterrent. I don't think anyone wants that. Red Bull already have quite a significant deterrent reduction in development compared to other teams. So I'm kind of okay with it, and I kind of hope. I do kind of hope we can move on from it, to be honest, as well as you've said, as Ted said, as a lot of people have said. I kind of hope, but not everyone will be able to.
No, it's an overspend, and an overspend is an overspend. So it's a breach of the rules. But what was it? Let's round it right up to the next 100,000 just for the sake of it. I mean, it's 500,000, less than 500,000, which is a lot of money to me and you, and to everybody watching, I'm sure. It's the kind of money that will change any of our lives. But in F1 terms, that's not going to be the reason Red Bull are dominating this year, which I think maybe takes the sting out of it all a little bit. If they'd overspent by a few million, like properly overspent by a few million, obviously the tax, it was all about tax, wasn't it, and rebates and all that. But if they'd overspent by like 5 million, then maybe it would be a bit more. But I kind of feel like, if that's what I suppose I would say, is that if that's what you get for just under $500,000 overspend, what are you going to get if you do spend like 4.9% more than you should do? That's going to hurt. And that, I feel like that might actually be the deterrent to put people off.
There's also another thing that I think is quite important to bear in mind, and this is something the FA have made very clear, is if it's clear you're doing it deliberately, the penalty will be much more severe. So there are people who are saying, like, including some quite prominent people who should know better, all the teams are just going to overspend now if they know this is a slap on the wrist. And it's like, no, they're not, because the FA will have said, if you're doing this deliberately because you think you're not going to get penalised very hard, you will get penalised much more severely. This was an accidental overspend. Again, very tricky to sort of understand. And I'm not an auditor. What is an accidental overspend and what's a deliberate one? But if all the teams start overspending now, it's going to be a sort of deliberate thing, and the FA will come down very, very hard on that. And just the other thing I thought was quite funny that came out of this was Christian Horner, saying this money didn't even go on the car, as if it's different money. It's all the same money. Like, some of your money went on the car, and some of your money went on catering, and some of your money went on staff, and it's all the same money.
All the same
you can't
cap.
pretend. Yeah, it's you can't just say this particular money wasn't spent on the car. That's not how money works.
I like Zakar's comment. He says, if Red Bull think it's too much and the competitors think it's too light, then it's probably about right. I think is a good one. Kaser says, bro, be serious. That was a slap on the wrist. A 10% reduction is not a slap on the wrist. I mean, I don't think they're going to struggle to find the $7 million, by the way. But 10% is not a slap on the wrist because that takes them down to, it's 10% off the 70, isn't it? So that's 7, so that's 63% in total they're going to have. That's substantial. But I think we said the other week, and we were going to end it up then. That's it. No more cost cap talk until we have this conversation next year if somebody else does it. But that's... do you know what? Actually, no, let's just leave it. We did it last week. We're going to forget about it. Because I think everyone's sick to death of it. I know I am. And it's not even been the most political of years in F1, has it? But it's kind of like, oh, God. Can we just focus on the racing? Because it's yeah.
That's the thing. It's just the worst possible kind of thing, isn't it? It's not interesting to talk about. It's not tangible. It's not racing. It's just kind of like, so it's done. They've been given their penalty. It'll be interesting to see what they say about it in terms of their development next year.
Let's do some quick fire questions and comments, just see what a few people are saying. Max says Brundle is British and commentates amazingly. Thomas says Sainz is 6th in the championship, really shows just how unlucky he's been this year. He does appear to have had the bulk of the bad luck at Ferrari. Although, I mean, Leclerc's had 3 DNFs. One of them was, of course, caused by him crashing out in France. But yeah, he's not had the luckiest of seasons, Sainz, and he has dropped to 6th in the standings. What is he now? 4 points behind Lewis Hamilton, who is closing the gap on his teammate. That's going to be a fun fight to the end of the season, by the way. Russell versus Hamilton for that final step on the podium, if you like. Is it? No, it wouldn't be, would it? No, it's 4th, sorry. 4th place. Leclerc's got 3rd. So I guess what we're looking at, Checo versus Leclerc for 2nd, Russell versus Hamilton with Sainz in there for 4th, 5th and 6th. If they care about that, I don't think they do. AlphaTauri versus Haas for 8th and 9th in the Constructors, 1 point between them. Aston versus Alfa Romeo for 6th and 7th. There's 4 points between them. And Mercedes and Alpine and McLaren, 7 points between them in the battle for 4th. So some good fights still out there. So keep an eye on what's going on there. Do you believe Ricciardo is saying he hasn't reached agreement to work with any team yet? Asked Falling Vega. I guess if you're going to be doing reserve role, you don't need to have it all sorted now, do you? It's not a mad rush, but I'd be surprised if he doesn't have a couple of offers on the table. It was Red Bull the other week was the rumour, wasn't it? That he might be on his way back to Red Bull, but I just hope he can have a really strong end to the season and give some teams something to think about for 24. Because if he struggles in Brazil and Abu Dhabi and then goes off and be in his reserve for a year, you're very quickly forgotten in F1. But the reality is, I don't know how you feel, Stuart, super quickly, but I just don't think he's been good enough this year. And if I was in McLaren's situation, I'd have handled it better. But I'd probably have made the same decision to bring somebody else in, because that inconsistency could cost him in the fight with Alpine easily.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. It's been a really tough year for him. Whatever the reason, he did not get on top of this car. He did not get on top of himself. But he's not. He's certainly not a bad driver. And if he's in a better situation, I think he could thrive. I mean, if we saw the second half of this race, for goodness sake, it's still Daniel Ricciardo inside there. I would like to see him, attached to a team, whoever it ends up being. And it sounded like he was, whatever he was doing, he was going to be a situation in which he would still be coming to at least, to most of the races, if not all of them. So it'd be good to see him around the paddock. I'm sure Sky will be nabbing him constantly to give opinions or or do things on the Sky pad or something if he's going to be a constant presence. I think it's touch and go whether we'll see him back again. Maybe he'll do a sort of Kevin Magnussen or something, and after a year out, find himself back in a team again that needs him. But it really depends on how good these juniors are and whether a team does need someone like him to develop their car or do what some of the sort of elder veteran drivers do and take on a kind of team leader role in a kind of moving a team from the lower ends to the top ends that some of them do. Who knows?
Will a sprint win for Hamilton count as maintaining his streak, says Thomas? That's Crofty on one all bloody weekend next time, isn't it? Now about whether it counts or not. Oh, it's a sprint weekend as well. Oh.
It's the kind of thing that drives Sean, what's his name, mad. The virtual stat man.
Statman, yeah.
He hates the sprint races because it messes with everything he's built over the years.
We'll get the usual. What's his tweet? Well, actually, I think you'll find that pole position is defined as who starts on pole on Sunday, not who sets the fastest lap in qualifying. Every sprint weekend, it's the same.
Yep. Not anymore. It's not. Oh god, yeah, nightmare. Maybe it'll be a little asterisk. I wouldn't call it that, but I would say at least salvages something.
It's Grand Prix victories, isn't it? Usually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
They just these sprints have really messed everything up.
Stats are ruined. The weekend. Look, the weekend doesn't flow properly. I enjoy more racing's got to be good, but you know. They really throw me off on a weekend. The flow's just not right at all. I saw a comment I wanted to read then. Arshad said Albon lap Latifi ? Did Albon lap Latifi? So Latifi was 58 seconds behind Magnussen. So you've got another 1.5, 9. Do you know, I think he bloody did. 9, 10, 68.
Yeah. I mean, it says Latifi's +2 laps and Albon's +1 lap.
Yeah, Albon was over a lap time. Yeah, I think he did. Bloody hell. Happy Halloween to you as well, James. Anyone celebrating Halloween? Happy Halloween. I got some sweets in case we get any kids at the door, so I guess I'm sitting and eating sweets all night tomorrow, just ignoring the door with a film. Probably Nightmare Before Christmas, as is tradition in this house. It is a Halloween film, isn't it? That's fair, yeah.
Yeah. And a Christmas film, weirdly.
Yeah, damn you. Maybe we should watch it mid-November just to be on the safe side. Couple more comments and then we're going to wrap up because, yeah, not a great race, but hey, it's a race. We're happy. Wait, we didn't do all our sprints this year yet, says Unknown Racer. I completely agree. Yeah, it's 6 next year. Yeah,
they better be good ones.
We're not sure yet on how they're going to do it, are we? I think there's still some debate over whether they're going to be the same as they do them this year, or whether they'll be a bit more standalone than they are now. Or I'm not sure on if the format's been completely agreed, which is interesting. It probably will be probably exactly the same. Pick a mix, yes, we do need a pick a mix. I got some Mawams because I like Mawams. Albert did great once he got going. Says Max. Yeah, it was absolutely. Did lap him. Apparently, people in chat confirming. So that's interesting. Will says embarrassing for Ferrari. Yeah, kind of feel like it will be. Brazil sprint next. Yippee, says Lordy. Rain, says Sean. Hey, Sean. Hope you're all right, mate. Thank you for reaching out, by the way, in DMs the other day to check I was okay. Appreciate that one, mate. But yeah, I think, should I get the cliche in early? Interlagos, between lakes, own climate, anything could happen.
Brilliant. Well
done. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there then for tonight because there's not much to talk about. We will be back for obviously post Brazil as well. But thank you very much, Stuart. I don't know why I'm going to apologise. It's not my fault, but sorry that the race wasn't all that thrilling. But only 2 to go now, and it is Brazil next. So again, anything could happen. It could be a cracker. Make up for this one, hopefully.
Yeah, if you could sort us out a better race for next time, that'd be great.
I apologise wholeheartedly.
Well, next time. So I'll let you go with this one. Yeah, but cheers. Thanks for the good chat. We got something out of this, didn't we?
Yes.
It's always, and you know what? Everyone's probably a bit tired by now, apart from the American lot who still have a whole evening ahead of them.
Yes.
Yeah, good chat. I will. Well, I'm not here for the next one, am I? But I'll chat to you offline.
Yes, I'm sure we will. Yeah, but I mean, I will just say quickly, we can do this on these race reactions. We fill 8 hours of testing, so it doesn't matter how bad the race is. We can still fill it, can't we? So, but yes, I'm sure I'll talk to you soon. And thank you so much again, Stuart. It was a pleasure as always.
Cheers. Good night.
Thanks to Stuart, and thank you, of course, to all of you guys for tuning in as well. Yeah, that's it for Mexico. Next up, Brazil. I bloody love Brazil. I absolutely love it. Please do drop a like, by the way, before you disappear. 377, 689 if you're still here. Let's see if we can get that last 123 to get us to 500 while I sign off. That would be absolutely amazing if we could do that, and hugely appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe as well. Lots coming up. I might do something this week on things still to be decided, like I did last year with a couple of races to go with the title wrapped up. It wasn't last year, it was the year before. So I might do that. But otherwise, it will be back for the preview for the Brazilian Grand Prix. It's the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Sorry, not Brazil. Sao Paulo Grand Prix preview a week on Thursday. And of course, we'll be live after the race in Brazil. And I think, I need to double check with him, but I think we'll have a new guest on for a debut appearance on one of these streams after Brazil. So that should be a lot of fun. Like I said, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to drop a like, and if you've got some evening ahead of you, maybe go off and see if you can watch a classic race that will make up for the majority of that one not being quite so good. Maybe not Canada 2011, it's a little bit too long. Social media links, of course, in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.